Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Math with Dr. War. Today I'm creating a little cheat sheet for the properties of exponents. Let's begin. We're going to start with the multiplicative property. This is what's called your product rule. So in class I call it the product rule, but my students just say you're multiplying, which is fine by me. So the product rule states if you have a base raised to an exponent and you're multiplying by a matching base raised to a different exponent, you keep your base and you add the exponents. Suppose I have 3 to the third and I'm multiplying by 3 to the fifth. The rule states you keep your base and you add the exponents. 3 plus 5, your answer 3 raised to the 8th power. Suppose I have variables. So I have x to the second multiplied by x to the 10th. Because my bases match, they're both x's. I'm going to keep the x and I'm going to add the exponents. 2 plus 10, my answer, x to the 12th. Now sometimes you're given coefficients. So coefficients are the integers that are in front of your variable. So I have 2x to the second y. This 2 here is my coefficient, such as this 4. Now I'm multiplying. So basically, we're going to put like terms with like terms. So the 2 and the 4 will multiply each other because they're integers. The x squared is going to multiply the x to the third, and the y is going to multiply the y to the fifth. Now, because the 2 and the 4 are integers or numbers, they're going to actually multiply because that's what we do with numbers. We add them, subtract them, multiply them, or divide them, depending on what operation we are asked to perform. Here it's multiplication. 2 times 4 is 8. However, here the rule states that if you have a base raised to an exponent and you're multiplying by a matching base, they're both x's, you keep your base and you add the exponents. And the same thing with the y. Now please remember there's an exponent here with the y. It's an invisible 1. So this will be 1 plus 5. So your answer is 8x raised to the 5th power with y raised to the 6th power. Next we have our power property. The power property or the power rule, that's what we call it in class. The power rule is when you have a base, which is raised to an exponent, and then you're raising it to another exponent. Now, my students always have difficulties trying to differentiate power rule from product rule. Notice that with the power rule, you will always have an exponent outside the parentheses, outside. And you always have 2 exponents. That's how I know the power rule. When I see 2 exponents and the 2 exponents are together with the same base. Notice here with the product rule, this a is raised to the m. This a is raised to the n. However, with the power rule, the a here, which is the base, which is one term, is raised to 2 exponents. This a is only raised to 1 exponent. 1 exponent, 2 exponents. So whenever you have a base raised to an exponent and then raised to another exponent, you keep your base and you multiply the exponents. So here I have 5 to the third, and then notice who is outside there, a 4. So I keep my base and I'm going to multiply the exponents. 3 times 4. My answer is 5. 3 times 4 is 12. So you always know your power rule because you have an exponent on the inside and you have one on the outside. You got 2 of them. Over here, this one has variables. So I have y to the third. So I have an exponent inside, and then look who's outside. Another exponent. So what do? We keep our base and we multiply the exponents. So this is y, 3 times 11, 33. Again, they can give you coefficients and they can give you more than one variable. But notice I have an exponent on the outside. So this is my power rule. Now this 4, you have to distribute it to everyone in this parentheses. It's like if you have one person in your house with a cold, everyone is going to get the cold. So here, the 6 is going to be raised to the 4. The x to the 4 is going to be raised to the 4. The y to the 8 is going to be raised to the 4. And the z is going to be raised to the 4. Everyone is going to get the cold. Now here, this is your coefficient, 6 to the 4. That means that 6 times 6 times 6 times 6, that is going to give me a very big number, 1,296. Now here, I'm going to keep my base and I'm going to multiply my exponents. Same thing for the y. I'm going to keep my base and I'm going to multiply 8 times 4. And then for the z, remember there's an invisible 1 there, and that will be 1 times 4. So my answer is 1,296, x to the 16, 4 times 4 is 16, y to the 32, 8 times 4 is 32, and z to the 4, 1 times 4 is 4. So if you have 3 terms in the parentheses, all 3 terms you must raise to the power of 4. So always remember the difference between the product rule and the power rule. The power rule always has an exponent on the inside and one on the outside. Notice, inside, outside. We have the division property. That's what we called in class the quotient rule. And the division property states, if you have a base raised to an exponent and you're dividing by a matching base raised to a different exponent, you keep your base and you subtract the exponents. So notice you subtract top exponent minus bottom exponent. So I have 3 raised to the 12th and I'm dividing by 3 to the 5th. So I keep my base and I have 12 take away 5. My answer, 3 to the 7th power. Suppose you have variables as your bases. So I have y to the 17th divided by y to the 6th. My bases match, so I'm going to keep the y, but I'm going to subtract the exponents. 17 take away 6. My answer is y to the 11th power. Again, they can give you coefficients. So if they give you coefficients, I like to separate them. So 3 over 9, those are dividing. Then I have x to the 10th divided by x to the 4th. Now when you're dividing, I always tell my students you're going to heaven. Can 9 divide 3 evenly? They'll tell me no. If that happens, you're going to reduce. So what would divide 3 and 9 evenly? That would be the number 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 9 divided by 3 is 3. And then remember, if your bases match, you keep your base and you're going to subtract the exponents. 10 take away 4. So your answer is a third x. 10 minus 4, 6. And just remember, your test is multiple choice. So your answer might not look like this. And 1 times x to the 6 is just x to the 6. And in the denominator is 3. But I have a feeling when you look at your multiple choice, you will be able to choose the correct answer. The zero property rule states that if you have a base raised to the 0 exponent, your answer is 1. Any number raised to the 0 power is equal to 1. Now I always get this in class. Someone always asks me, well, what is 0 raised to 0? The answer to that is undefined. It does not exist. But always remember, if you have any number or any variable, x(0), raised to the 0 exponent, your answer is 1. So I have 100 raised to the 0 exponent, my answer is 1. Here, now you see the exponent outside, so you're like, power rule, but do we really have to distribute that? Everyone is inside the parentheses, which means everyone needs to get the 0. Which means your answer is 1. Same thing here. Notice all of these are inside the parentheses and there's your 0 on the outside, which means your answer is 1. Now, when I look at this example here, I notice that the 0 is only with who's inside the parentheses, which is this, but not the 3. So I'm going to keep the 3, and then the a squared, b to the 4th, which is all raised to 0, is 1. So my answer is just 3. 3 times 1 is 3. So with the 0 property, always check to see who is raised to the 0 power. Last one, the negative exponent property. Basically what this states is if you have a base raised to a negative exponent, so you have to write it in a positive format. And the positive format is 1 over a, and now your exponent becomes positive. So you actually write the reciprocal. When you get your answer or you look at your problem and you see a negative exponent, you're going to draw a fraction bar, and then we talk about this in terms of eviction. So if we need to evict this person, evict means we have to remove them. So this person is technically in the numerator, correct? Because if I make a fraction, that's over 1. So if we evict them, we're going to move them from the numerator to the denominator. And when we move them, they become positive. Now you're going to ask me, what happens to the numerator? You can't leave it blank. No, you're going to put a 1 there as a placeholder. So your answer is 1 over 3 to the 4th power. And then sometimes on the TASC test, they might want you to evaluate that. So that's actually 1 over 3 to the 4th because this exponent is pretty small. That will be 1 over 81. Remember, they're not going to have both answers. They're going to have either or. Over here, I have x to the negative 6. I see the negative exponent. So I have my fraction bar. This person cannot stay in the numerator, so they go to the denominator and become positive, and then I have my 1. Here with this problem, I see the fraction bar, so I'm like, oh, I'm dividing. So I have 16 divided by 2, and then the x to the negative 10 is being divided by the x to the negative 2, so the bases match. Now, because these are coefficients and numbers, I'm going to divide. So 2 goes into 16 8 times. Cool. Now here, when your bases match, you keep your base, but we're dividing, so you must subtract. So this will be negative 10, take away negative 2. This is not your subtraction sign. This is telling you that your exponent is a negative 2. So this is actually negative 10 plus 2. So my answer is 8x to the negative 8. But remember, when you see a negative exponent, draw your fraction bar. Okay, who's going to get evicted out of this relationship right here? The 8 is going to stay in the apartment, but the x to the negative 8, that have to go. So they're going to go to the denominator position and become positive. And that's your answer. Okay, let's recap all of the rules. So with the product rule, product means multiply. So with the product rule, if you have a base raised to an exponent and you're multiplying by a matching base raised to a different exponent, the rule states you keep your base and you add. So the 2 plus the 8, your answer is a to the 10th power. Now remember, with the power rule, you have 2 exponents. So if you have a to the 2nd, so you have an exponent on the inside raised to an exponent on the outside, you keep your base and you multiply 2 times 8. Your answer is a to the 16th power. So remember, with the power rule, you have an exponent inside and an exponent outside. With the quotient rule, remember quotient means to divide. With the quotient rule, if you have a base raised to an exponent and you're dividing by a matching base raised to a different exponent, you keep your base and you subtract 8 minus 2. And you get a to the 6th power. Now with the 0 rule, remember that anything raised to the 0 power is 1. And then if you have a negative exponent, the negative rule. If you have, let's say, 3 to the negative 5, once you see the negative fraction bar, this goes to the denominator and becomes positive, and then there's your 1. I hope this has been helpful. Good luck in your examination, whether it's the TASC test or whether it's the CEIF examination. Good luck.